Hello, and welcome to the fourth and final episode in a series of 4 podcasts produced by Public Health Scotland and Suicide Prevention Scotland, exploring ways in which people working closely with distressing issues can help to keep themselves and colleagues safe and well. There are so many ways in which staff working around difficult topic areas can be exposed to upsetting information that can be overwhelming. With these podcasts, we'll hopefully give you the information you need to help look after yourself and the people around you, learn how to spend some time on nurturing and caring for yourself, and the things you can do to maintain your well-being and thrive in your role. My name is Janet Watson. I'm a counsellor, writer, and former journalist. And I've worked closely with client trauma, as well as experiencing it myself. I've always been interested in what makes people tick, and have recently come to understand the importance of being my own client and keeping a weather eye on my own mental health. Exposure to difficult information, data, and discussions in our work lives can become very normal, but it can chip away at our resilience if we let it. As I suggested in episode 1, take another pause to stop and think about your own personal experience of working with what we call the difficult stuff. What are you doing to look after yourself? I've previously suggested that you kick back for the duration of this podcast, relax, and try to put aside the needs of others while you take some time out for yourself. Often we're so busy helping others that we forget about ourselves and our own needs. We go to the back of the queue. Well, for the next few minutes, I'm once again saying that the roots of coping with difficult work and avoiding stress and compassion fatigue lie in 2 little words. You first. In the 3rd episode, we looked at how organisations can help and support their staff, and how staff and management can work together to develop the kinds of positive working habits we touched on in episode 2. In this episode, we'll be focusing on what happens to us when work is not just work. This might be because someone else's trauma and lived experience is similar to our own, or that of someone that we care about. Or because we've become so emotionally invested in the work that we are doing that it is gone beyond being just a job. It feels more like a calling. How do we cope? We're all human and have experienced pain and suffering in our lives. We don't leave that at the door when we come to work. You may have heard of the concept of the wounded healer. This is a phrase that was first conceptualized by the psychologist Carl Jung to describe individuals who, because of their own experiences and vulnerabilities, are uniquely placed to understand the suffering of and to empathize with the pain of others. If you recall the scientific basis for empathy and our human biological ability to mirror and experience what others are feeling that we talked about in episode 1, then the coming together of experience and biology is a powerful driver to push us in the direction of others' suffering, even when we might not have fully understood the effect of our own suffering. One of the formative experiences of my young life was the loss of someone I loved in a car crash. I experienced a deep and profound grief that certainly knocked my life off course in my early 20s, and it's absolutely no surprise now, looking back with new understanding, that I was first drawn to work with Cruse Bereavement Care Scotland when I started training to be a counsellor. As well as feeling an affinity for people struggling with loss, I think a part of me also believed that if I worked closely with death, then it wouldn't be able to hurt me again. That was wishful thinking, and what I found instead was that I became burned out and had to take a break from working with Cruse to recover and find a healthier relationship with the work I was learning to do. I realised I couldn't work that closely to death all the time and remain immune from its impact. So what happens when what might sometimes feel like our superpower at work could also be our downfall? What's it like when our work feels more than a job? I'm joined by Jenny Smith, a suicide prevention implementation lead with Public Health Scotland and formerly the suicide prevention lead in NHS Borders. Joining Jenny is Danielle Rowley, Head of Policy and Communications with Samaritans Scotland. I'm grateful that Jenny and Danielle have offered to share their own views and experiences of working in difficult topic areas and the steps they take to manage their own well-being as they do. Jenny and Danielle, it's lovely to see you. Thanks for coming in to talk to us today. And I wondered if we could start with an easy question, although it probably isn't at all. I wonder if you could both explain to me what drew you both to the work that you do.
I think that I'm always drawn to work in roles where I feel quite passionate about it. I think I find it really hard to actually be motivated and do a good job if I don't feel passionate about something. And thinking about suicide prevention and all of the different things that comes under that sort of broad banner, I just feel really passionate and want to help people, want to make a difference. And then having lived experience as well certainly is something that I think drove me towards this role.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, similar to you, Danielle, I've always wanted to do a role that sort of makes a difference. That's always really driven me in all of the roles that I've done up until now. I think when I was at university, I went on some assist training. I'd been supporting some students that I was working with and also some family as well with their mental health and thoughts of suicide. And so I got really interested and wanted to make a difference, I guess, in the mental health sort of world. And suicide prevention was a job that came up and I felt quite passionately about. I think, like you said as well, it cuts across so many different aspects of society as well that you can make a difference around. So you're really looking at tackling some of those inequalities that we see in our work as well.
So for both of you then, it sounds as though it wasn't ever going to be just a job. The roles that you're doing right now, they are sort of a cross between a job and a calling, if we want to put it that way. I wonder if you could say to me whether there are times when it does feel more like a job, and what does that feel like? And do you think it helps you in your work? So when it sort of, I guess, comes down onto a different level of nuts and bolts, does that make sense?
Yeah, so I guess I was just talking about the assist training that I went on, the suicide prevention training. And I think once you've been on training like that, if you're working in a role around suicide prevention, you can't ignore sort of signs that somebody might be struggling. You really want to sort of step in and help. We know that people are anxious about having those conversations. So, you have that feeling that you need to step in and support somebody, that you might be the only person who's going to ask them if they're having thoughts of suicide as well. You might be the one to connect them to some support. So I think there is sort of, you feel a bit of a responsibility and stepping up to sort of take that role and support others.
Yeah, I think you come across suicide so much in society and people might not usually pick up on it or notice it, but certainly when you work in suicide prevention, you are much more sensitive to it, you see it a lot. So I think even when I'm on like local Facebook groups, if I see somebody posting about they're really struggling, it's not something you can just think, well, I'm not working now, that's not my job. So I'm like a serial signposter. I'm always in these groups posting Samaritans infographics, telling people the different sources of support, linking to websites, and then, of course, people that you come across in your personal life who are struggling. And I think that actually people open up much more. They know where you work, they know that you do this job, so they're not scared to say, I'm having suicidal feelings, as much as maybe they would be with someone else, because they, I think, expect that you wouldn't be shocked and you're used to this language.
Yeah, exactly. It's about that, isn't it? Being used to being able to talk about it. And yet at the same time, it becomes normal. It becomes a very normal thing, which when we're talking about, compassion fatigue, the starts of things like burnout and vicarious trauma, obviously suicide isn't necessarily normal. So how do you find that balance, I guess, in your work?
That's such a tricky question because it is emotional and it can be quite difficult and even draining if you're thinking about heavy topics like suicide all of the time. So I guess it's about creating boundaries and just protecting your space and trying to maybe avoid the news or avoid places where, you might be distressed a bit more. And I think having good relationships with people around you and friends so that they know when you need support, they know when they can come to you, and maybe when you need a little bit of space.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jenny, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things I really struggled with when I first started working in suicide prevention is you learn a lot about the sort of types of people who might be at risk.
Yeah.
And I started seeing risk sort of everywhere in my environment, in my friends. I probably asked too many times if people were thinking of suicide, but I guess at least they knew they could come to me and have that conversation. But I had to do quite a lot of work sort of in myself to stop myself seeing that risk everywhere. It wasn't a sort of a healthy way of thinking about the work. And so I had to do a bit of work to sort of support myself in that. And I guess try and build in some of those boundaries as well.
Yeah. How do you build in those boundaries then? I know you were expecting that question. I could see your face, Danielle. How do you do that?
I think that's a harder question to answer, and it looks different for everyone. But I think that I found trying to turn off from work as much as possible. And then I'm about to say some things that are good to do that I don't do because I don't follow my own advice. But I think, not having work apps on your personal phones and devices, putting your laptop away at the end of the day, and just trying to kind of switch off a bit. So at least when there are things that come up just in your own personal life, it's, that's organic. It's not you then logging on to try and do some emails or, our work is never done. It's endless. You could just work 24/7. So it's being really strict about that and protecting yourself and not feeling bad for not being on all the time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with some of those tips. I think it's also got harder since a lot of us are working from home post-COVID as well. So before, my car journey home used to be a good buffer for me to sort of process some of those thoughts. And I remember during COVID, I had 14 steps walking downstairs from being sort of suicide prevention coordinator to being mum and sort of primary snack giver. So I think that was a time when I had to really build in some of those boundaries. So making sure that you weren't accessing work stuff outside of work. I think particularly late at night for me. So I support quite a lot of coordinators working locally around suicide prevention. It's not uncommon for them or for people in our work to talk about sort of strange dreams and things like that. So I think if you can make sure that you've got that difference between sort of stopping work and sort of doing something else before you go to sleep, that's really helpful. I think I used to manage suicide reviews in the local area I worked in. And so we would get information through when somebody had died by suicide. And so we did some quite practical things there, like setting up a separate inbox so I could choose sort of when to go into that. And, I wouldn't do that at 5 o'clock on a Friday because I knew I wouldn't be able to take action to sort of support somebody at that time. So, some quite practical things there, I think.
It's so interesting when you talk about weird dreams. I think that was one of the most difficult times for me when I knew that I was a victim of vicarious trauma, but I couldn't work out why. And it was a dream. It was a dream I had and it was so horrible. I can't even describe how I felt when I woke up. And I'd seen a client the day before who hadn't disclosed anything, but I knew that there was an awful lot going on there. And I think what happened in that really brief time that we were together was I just downloaded the whole lot and out it came in a dream.
I know that feeling. I'm a bit like a sponge. So I guess I've learned for me personally, I take on a lot of people's their feelings sometimes as well. So, I remember one time talking to somebody who was bereaved by suicide and, it was a really powerful experience that they'd had. It was horrible for them. And I just sort of, when we hung up the phone, I just had a good cry. Yeah. But I think it also drove me and gave me some sort of power to want to make a difference, to push our organisation at the time to do more around that work as well. So, and I couldn't do my job without that interaction with people who have that sort of lived experience, because I think working nationally, sometimes you can become a bit disconnected from people's real sort of experiences. So it's so important for us to have that sort of human connection and relationships with people. And that helps us drive that purpose that we were talking about at the start.
Yeah.
And I think it can be helpful for our well-being as well. I get really emotional when other people are emotional, and I think you used a term earlier, was it compassion fatigue?
Compassion fatigue.
Yeah, and I think that it can be really draining when you feel other people's emotions strongly, but then when you have a job where you get to come to work and do something about it, so you think, I'm really upset because this circumstance or something that's happened to someone, but I can take that emotion and go to work and kind of carry that with me to try and make sure change happens. And that, I think, is good for your well-being. You're not just sitting with it thinking, oh God, nothing will ever change.
Yeah. And I think one of the things about this, isn't it, it becomes what we've called here our superpower. You know, we're taking that into work, and you said that really, really clearly. You feel you can then make a difference, you can use it, and you can change something. And that's just amazing, isn't it?
I think the other powerful thing is when you can support other people to make change as well.
Yep.
So I worked in my previous role with a group of people who were bereaved by suicide, and I didn't want to do those things for them. I wanted to work with them and empower them. They wanted to share their experiences as well, and I was in a position where I was able to support them to do that, help them access some funding to be able to do that and take that forward. And that, in a way, was also some of the recovery, I think, for them, and the support. They made sort of new friends through that experience as well.
Yeah. Now, for so many of us, work is more than just a job. It really means something. When we're working in and around difficult topics, or when things are feeling particularly stressful or overwhelming, it's important to remember the reasons why we do what we do. We asked some of our suicide prevention colleagues, many of whom are working in pretty demanding roles, what it is that gets them out of bed in the morning.
My alarm. No, it's not. It's also about making a difference. I mean, really, do you know what I mean? I'm really lucky that I get to do a job that I really care about, I'm really passionate about. And for me, it's been a vocation, you know. It's been something that I've kind of worked on since I left uni millions of years ago, and it's been a journey. And so to be able to do research in this field and hopefully make a difference in policy and practice through that is a really important job, and it's a privilege.
It's just, you know, it's an area in which I'm passionate about. It is an area where you can actually see change, and as long as you're continually moving, then we'll actually see the change we want to see in our communities.
Just seeing the change in some of the people that we work with. So I'm a facilitator for North Ayrshire Recovery College, and we work with the CHIME model. So that's connection, hope, identity, meaning and empowerment. And inside that 5-week course, that's in each week, it's only an hour and a half long, the difference it makes for the connection of people coming together, and it almost builds a wee community. So that gives me that buzz to go out and do a bit more.
I think it matters greatly to me as a volunteer facilitator for Andy's Man Club that giving back to your community is a hugely important thing, I think, in anybody's state of play within their mental health, but making sure that you're mindful of letting someone else's light shine through you shining, and we all make that light shine together in a circle of men talking about mental health without the stigma of feeling shameful or scared to do it. I think powerful vulnerability is a beautiful phrase, because it's taken away the weakness when you feel vulnerable. It's a gift, it's a strength.
The phrase the responsibility to and not responsibility for kind of springs to mind there, which is one of the things that was drummed into me when I was learning how to be a counsellor. I have a responsibility to my clients, but I'm not responsible for them. But sometimes when somebody is suicidal, actively suicidal, it's really, really difficult to keep saying to myself, I'm not responsible for keeping this person alive. You know, that's ultimately their responsibility, not mine.
It is hard feeling the weight of responsibility sometimes. And I was thinking about when each year data is released about the number of people who've died by suicide the previous year. And that's a day where it's always so difficult for everyone working in suicide prevention, because you do feel this responsibility. And if the numbers increase, even though theoretically and logically you know that, a year-on-year increase is, you need to take it over a longer time and a trend, and that's how you see if things are really having an impact. But just on that one day, it can really feel a lot, and you can feel a sort of overwhelming feeling of having let people down. And then if you have lived experience as well, especially if you've lost someone who then you're thinking, well, they are one of those numbers, it can be such a difficult day to try and look after your own well-being and separate that and not feel the weight of that responsibility. And I think that responsibility too is a good way of looking at it.
I think we see that with some of the people we work with locally as well, that they really feel that responsibility. They want to, everyone I know who works in suicide prevention, either by chance or by sort of choice, really cares about the work that they do as well. And so we've been doing quite a lot of work to look at how do they look at where they are making a positive difference as well. So it might be that a new peer support service has opened in that sort of time period since the last data has been released, and that's making a real difference to people, and they know that. So looking at where there is hope, where there is work that's improving people's lives and making a difference to people is so important for the roles that we do, and seeing that change and hope as well.
So seeing the positives there. And we've talked earlier, I think in podcast 2 or 3, about how important positive feedback is for people working in the kind of jobs that you both do. And knowing that you have made a difference, it's been a positive difference. And on days like that, as you were saying, that can, I guess, really help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having positive feedback, especially when you are bringing your whole self to work, if that's the way you work, it's so important in making you feel like you've, achieved something and you're doing a good job.
So on the days when perhaps you are your whole self at work and something has been really difficult, how would you both go and chill afterwards? I mean, how do you debrief, decompress, whatever it is you need to do?
I love this question because we ask this in interviews at Samaritans. So when I've been recruiting for staff, we always ask this, and I say to people, there's not a right answer to this. It's not a test. But then I guess there's a wrong answer, because the wrong answer is, I don't need to do that. I'm not affected by it. It's fine. I'm really robust and don't get emotional, because that's just not really true for most people. It's really difficult not to be touched by the work that we do. But people often say, after work, I get outside, I get away from my desk, I get outside, I go for a walk or see friends, spend time with family. And I think for me, that's the big one, is spending time with friends and family who are not in this space. So I'm not going to end up talking about work, and just having fun and doing something light.
So literally just lifting your head up and saying, right, there is life here. And this is my life, basically.
And I think, I don't know if you'll agree, Jenny, but I think having a small child is a great way of switching off, because you've been talking about suicide all day, and then they come and talk to you about poo-poo heads and just ridiculous stuff, and it completely removes you from that situation.
I agree. Having 2 small boys as well keeps you on your toes as well, so what's in the snack jar becomes more important than what you were doing at work that day. I also get a lot of support from the peers that I work with. So I think finding some people who do similar roles to you, a lot of my friends and family probably don't really understand what my job is, probably can't fully talk about that. And so having close peers within work that you can talk to, have a bit of a debrief with, who can provide that support for you has always been really important for me throughout the different roles that I've done. I guess in terms of my own well-being as well, I really like listening to things like podcasts and audiobooks as well. So if it's been a difficult day, I find sometimes with music, my mind still sort of wanders. But if I'm listening to a story, a fictional story, it can take my mind away. It can be that sort of distraction, which sometimes is the thing that you need after a tough day.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your experiences with us. That's great.
Thanks.
As we've just heard, it can be our own experiences of trauma that lead us to the work that we do. Awareness of that and how we look after ourselves and the scars left by past experience is so important. In The Haunted Self, a 2006 report of research into dissociation and chronic trauma, the researchers found that under the impact of trauma, we split ourselves into what they term an apparently normal part and an emotional part of the personality. They found that for the coping self, or the apparently normal part, the emotional part is a problem to be avoided or suppressed. When that happens and we subconsciously deny or dissociate from memories and emotions, then the emotional part often resorts to producing psychological and or somatic symptoms to get our attention. Hello, compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. To stay well, we need to stay aware and help our emotional part feel safe, even when we're coping with traumatic data at work. We can use some of the self-care strategies we've looked at earlier in the series to help us to do this. I want to thank my guests in today's podcast, Jenny and Danielle, for taking the time to share their experiences to help us all learn and better understand the impact of the work we do and how we can be kind to and look after ourselves. I also want to thank you, the listener, for spending the time with us in this and previous episodes. We hope that you have found it helpful. Please do share with any colleagues or friends who might also benefit from the discussions information contained in these episodes. If you're looking for further information about the topics covered in the podcast, please check out the episode notes for links and resources. Thank you once again to you and to all of my guests. Thanks for listening to this podcast from Public Health Scotland and Suicide Prevention Scotland. Views or statements shared do not imply formal endorsement or promotion of any specific approach, service, or model. The guests in this episode have shared insight from their practice and experiences. This podcast is not intended to provide clinical guidance or professional advice.